Welcome back to the channel, everybody. There's a term floating around online right now called financial maxing, basically optimizing every single part of your money life instead of just kind of coasting through it and hoping it works out. And whether you've heard the term or not, the concept isn't new. It's just a new name for something that actually works. And honestly, a lot of the actual habits behind it are pretty unglamorous once you break them down. So today, we're breaking down the tier list of the best ways to financial max in your 20s, ranked from the habits that move the needle the most, all the way down to the ones that are more personal preference than anything else. And stick around, because the last one on this list is honestly the one most people skip, even though it might matter more than half the stuff above it. Let's get into it. First up on the list here, before any of the flashier stuff, is actually building a real emergency fund. And I almost feel bad putting something this basic at the top of a financial maxing list, but skipping it is genuinely one of the most common mistakes I see people make once they get excited about optimizing everything. 3 to 6 months of expenses sitting in something safe and liquid, a high yield savings account is fine, means one car repair or one layoff, doesn't force you to unwind investments or rack up debt at the worst possible time. I've seen people build genuinely impressive investment portfolios and then have the whole thing derailed by a single emergency because they never bothered building this cushion first. And a mistake I'd flag here, this fund isn't supposed to be invested in the market either. The whole point is that it's boring and stable, so it's actually there when you need it instead of down 20% at the exact wrong moment. So if this isn't already in place, everything else on this list should honestly wait until it is. Next up is automating your savings and your investing so the money moves before you ever get a chance to spend it. And this sounds almost too simple to matter, right? But it's honestly one of the highest leverage habits you can build. The second your paycheck hits, if a chunk of it automatically routes into savings or investments before it ever touches your checking account, you're not relying on willpower every single month to do the right thing. And willpower is unreliable. We all know this. Some months you're motivated, some months you're not. But automation doesn't care how you're feeling that week. I've noticed the people who build wealth consistently almost never talk about budgeting every dollar perfectly. They just made the good decision once, automated it, and then basically forgot about it. A mistake I see a lot is people setting up automatic transfers and then immediately moving the money back out the second something tempting comes up, which kind of defeats the whole point. The trick is putting that money somewhere slightly annoying to access, a separate account, a brokerage app you don't check daily, anything that adds just enough friction to stop impulse transfers back. So if you're not already doing this is genuinely one of the easiest wins on this entire list. Next up is attacking high-interest debt as aggressively as you possibly can. And I know we've talked about this before on the channel, but it deserves a spot at the top of this list too, because no amount of investing gains is going to outrun a credit card sitting at 25% interest. A common mistake I see with people trying to financial max is they get excited about investing and forget that paying off expensive debt is the higher return move. Mathematically, every single time. So if you're serious about maxing your finances, any extra income needs to go toward crushing that debt first, not into some new investment app you just downloaded. And if you're carrying multiple cards, tackle the highest rate first, not the smallest balance, because the interest is what's actually costing you money every single month, not the total number sitting on the statement. Next is negotiating your salary instead of just accepting whatever number gets thrown at you. And this one gets skipped constantly because negotiating feels awkward. Right? Nobody loves that conversation. But the raise you negotiate today doesn't just affect this year's paycheck. It compounds into every future raise and every future job offer that's based off your current salary. I've talked to people who left literally thousands of dollars on the table simply because they didn't ask. And the worst case scenario of asking is almost always just hearing no, which costs you nothing. And you don't need some elaborate script either. Sometimes it's as simple as asking if there's any flexibility on the number, or bringing market data for similar roles into the conversation instead of just guessing what's fair. So if you've never negotiated an offer or a raise, this is one of the highest return conversations you'll ever have in your career. Even a modest bump negotiated at 25 compounds into a noticeably different number by the time you're 45, purely from every future raise being calculated off a higher starting point. Next up is maximizing every single dollar of free money available to you, starting with your employer 401k match if you have one. And I know I've mentioned this on the channel before too, but it belongs on a financial maxing list because it's genuinely the highest guaranteed return available to almost anyone. An instant 100% return the moment it hits your account. Beyond the match, that also means actually using benefits like HSA contributions, commuter benefits, or tuition reimbursement, whatever your company offers that most people leave completely unused because they never bothered checking what's really available. I've talked to people who went years without realizing their company offered a match at all, simply because nobody walked them through their benefits when they got hired. So this is genuinely worth a quick 5-minute check if you've never looked. All right, those 5: the emergency fund, automating your money, crushing high interest debt, negotiating your income, and grabbing every dollar of free money available to you. Those are the actual foundation. The stuff that matters no matter your specific situation. Everything from here gets a little more about strategy and lifestyle, and honestly, some of these are going to spark some disagreement in the comments. Next up is building more than one income stream instead of relying entirely on a single paycheck. Now, I'm not saying you need 5 side hustles running at once. That's a recipe for burning yourself out fast. I'm talking about having at least one additional stream, whether that's freelancing, a small business, dividend income eventually, something that isn't tied to a single employer's decisions about your future. Because the truth is, your primary income can disappear overnight through a layoff or a restructuring, and having even a small secondary stream gives you a cushion. Next is getting creative with your biggest expense, which for most people is housing. Whether that's getting a roommate, house hacking by renting out part of a place you own, or just being realistic about what you can actually afford instead of stretching for the nicest apartment you can barely justify, housing is usually the single biggest lever you have on your monthly budget. A lot of people obsess over cutting small stuff like coffee, while ignoring the fact that their rent alone is eating 40 or 50% of their income, and that math is never going to work out favorably no matter how many lattes you skip. That's not to say never enjoy a nice place. It's just that this is the one line item worth actually scrutinizing hard, because a small change here moves the needle way more than trimming a handful of small subscriptions ever will. Next up is investing consistently no matter what the market's doing. This ties back to something we've talked about before. Trying to time the market almost never works, even for professionals. The people who build serious wealth are the ones who kept investing through the crashes, through the recessions, through all the scary headlines, instead of pulling out and waiting for some perfect moment that never really arrives. A simple way to enforce this on yourself is just automating your contributions on a set schedule, so the decision gets made once instead of every single month, based on how the news happens to look that week. So if maxing your finances is the goal, consistency is going to beat intensity almost every single time. Next is actually tracking your net worth, not just your bank balance, on a regular basis. I think a lot of people avoid this because it feels intimidating, especially early on when the number might be small or even negative because of student loans or debt. But watching that number move, even slowly, is one of the most motivating things you can do. And it also forces you to notice when something's off, like spending creeping up or an account you forgot you were paying for. 10 minutes a month checking this number keeps you honest, in a way that just vibing through your finances never will. You don't need some elaborate spreadsheet either. Even a free tracking app that pulls your accounts together automatically is more than enough to spot trends over time. The number itself matters way less early on than the direction it's moving in month over month. Next up is investing time and sometimes money into building high-income skills, whatever that looks like in your specific field. This ties directly back to negotiating, because you're in a much stronger position asking for more money when you can actually point to skills that make you more valuable, not just more tenure. A lot of people wait for their employer to invest in their development and just kind of stagnate in the meantime, when honestly, the people who actively seek out certifications, courses, or just deliberate practice on their own time tend to see their income grow a lot faster than people just waiting their turn. This doesn't have to be expensive either. A huge amount of genuinely useful skill building is available for free or close to it if you go looking for it instead of assuming it requires some formal expensive program. A good way to figure out where to focus is just looking at what the highest earners in your specific field actually know how to do that you don't yet, and working backward from there. Next up is actually diversifying instead of betting everything on one stock, one strategy, or one big idea you saw someone hype up online. And I get the appeal. Everyone's heard the story of someone who went all in on one thing early, and it paid off huge. But for every one of those stories, there are a lot more people who went all in and lost most of what they had. Spreading your money across broad, diversified investments isn't as exciting as betting big on one thing, but it means one bad call doesn't wipe out years of work. And that kind of durability is what actually lets you keep maxing your finances for decades, instead of getting knocked out of the game after one rough year. It's the same reason boring index funds tend to beat most people trying to pick individual winners. The goal isn't excitement, it's not losing everything you've built on a single bad bet. This next one's going to get some pushback, but I'm putting it out there anyway. Next up is aggressively cutting lifestyle creep as your income grows. This is the one that trips up almost everyone, because it doesn't feel like a mistake in the moment. It feels like you're just enjoying the fact that you're finally making more money. But if every raise immediately turns into a bigger apartment, a nicer car, more takeout, you're never actually widening the gap between what you earn and what you spend, and that gap is the entire engine behind building wealth. I'm not saying live like you're broke forever. I'm saying be intentional about which upgrades really matter to you and skip the ones you're only making, because you technically can. Now, a good habit here is picking one or two upgrades that genuinely make you happier, and letting the rest of the raise just quietly go toward savings and investing instead. Next is learning the basics of your own taxes and optimizing tax-advantaged accounts like your Roth IRA, your HSA, whatever's available to you. Most people treat taxes as this scary thing they avoid thinking about until April. But understanding even the basics can save you real money every year, legally, just by using the accounts and deductions that already exist for exactly this purpose. You don't need to become an accountant. You just need to understand enough to not be leaving money on the table out of pure avoidance. Even just an hour spent learning the basics of how your specific accounts are taxed can end up saving you way more than that hour was worth. Next up is building and protecting your credit score like it actually matters, because it genuinely does. A strong credit score affects the interest rate on basically every major purchase you'll ever make. A car, a house, sometimes even insurance rates and apartment applications. The mistake people make is ignoring it completely until they need it for something big, and by then, it's too late to fix quickly. Small consistent habits, paying on time, keeping utilization low, checking your report occasionally, that's really all it takes. And a lot of the credit building tricks people obsess over online are way less important than just those three basics, done consistently for a couple of years. Next is investing time into relationships and networking. Not in some fake transactional way, just genuinely staying in touch with people and being someone others want to help out. A huge amount of opportunities, job offers, business deals, partnerships come through relationships rather than cold applications, and people who financial max everything else, but ignore this piece, are usually leaving a lot of potential opportunity on the table without even realizing it. This doesn't need to feel forced either. It can be as simple as actually keeping in touch with old coworkers instead of letting every professional relationship quietly disappear the moment you switch jobs. Next is making sure you have the right insurance in place, because this is the part of financial maxing that almost nobody wants to talk about since it's not exciting at all. Health insurance, renter's insurance, maybe term life, if anyone depends on your income, whatever applies to your situation. The entire point of building all this wealth is protecting your future. And one uncovered emergency, a bad accident, a major medical bill, can wipe out years of careful saving and investing in a single event if you're not properly covered. A lot of people in their 20s skip this or go with the bare minimum because they feel invincible, and it's genuinely one of the easiest things to fix once you sit down and look at what you have. Next is genuinely just ignoring financial flexing on social media, because it quietly wrecks more financial decisions than people realize. Someone posts a new car, a vacation, some crypto win, and suddenly you feel behind and start making decisions based on catching up to a version of someone's life you don't actually know the full picture of. Most of what gets posted is either financed, exaggerated, or just not the whole story. And comparing your actual timeline to a highlight reel is a great way to make a decision. Today, you'll regret in a couple of years. Financial maxing isn't a competition against strangers online. It's just about your own numbers steadily moving in the right direction. And honestly, most of the people actually maxing their finances well are the ones you'd never guess it from their feed. Because they're not posting about it, they're just quietly letting it compound. Next up is frugality, but I want to be careful with this one. Cutting unnecessary spending is genuinely powerful, but there's a version of this that goes too far, where every single purchase becomes a source of anxiety, and you're not actually enjoying any of the money you're working so hard to save. The goal isn't to spend $0 on anything fun ever, it's to be intentional. Cut what doesn't matter to you and keep what does, without turning your entire life into a spreadsheet. I've seen people get so deep into extreme frugality that they burn out on the whole process entirely and end up swinging in the opposite direction, which usually does more damage than just spending normally in the first place. Next is a trap I see a lot in the financial maxing space specifically, constantly chasing whatever new hack or trend is going around instead of sticking to the fundamentals that actually work. New apps, new strategies, some new tax loopholes somebody's hyping up, and people jump from one shiny thing to the next instead of just automating the basics and letting them compound for a decade. The boring stuff works. It's just boring. And a lot of people mistake boredom for ineffectiveness when it's usually the opposite. If a strategy sounds like it's promising to skip the whole waiting decades part, That's usually a pretty reliable sign to be skeptical of it. Next up is something small but genuinely worth doing: sitting down once a year and actually auditing your recurring bills. Insurance rates, phone plans, streaming subscriptions, internet, all of that stuff tends to creep up quietly over time. And companies are counting on the fact that most people never bother shopping around or calling to ask for a better rate. It's not going to change your life on its own, but a single afternoon spent doing this can genuinely free up real money every single month without you having to change a single spending habit otherwise. And now, the one I told you about at the beginning. Last on the list here is actually reviewing your progress regularly instead of setting things up once and never looking at it again. A lot of people financial max for a few months, get everything automated and optimized, and then just stop paying attention entirely, assuming it'll all handle itself forever. But your life changes, your income changes, your goals change, and if you never sit down and check whether your setup still makes sense, you can end up years down the line with a plan that made sense for a version of you that doesn't exist anymore. So block out even just 20 minutes every few months to look at where things stand, adjust what needs adjusting, and keep the whole system honest. That's genuinely the piece that separates people who max their finances for a summer from the people who do it for the next 30 years. It's the least exciting item on this entire list, and it's also probably the one doing the most quiet work behind the scenes. So that's my tier list for the best ways to financial max in your 20s. None of it's flashy, and honestly, most of it is going to feel a little boring compared to whatever new trend shows up online next week. But boring and consistent is what actually compounds over time. Let me know in the comments what you'd add, what you disagree with, or what's actually worked for you. Thank you guys for watching, and as always, I'll catch you guys in the next one. See you.